You think you remember the golden age of television, the hits, the classics, the shows that shaped culture. But hidden beneath that success lies a graveyard of forgotten failures, shows that cost fortunes, shows that confused audiences, shows that vanished almost overnight. Today we are uncovering 20 of the biggest flops of the 70s, and some of them failed so badly, you will not believe they ever existed. Number 20, Supertrain, 1979. The dream was bigger than television itself. A nuclear-powered train slicing across America, luxury beyond imagination, celebrities boarding like royalty, and a network betting everything on one impossible idea. That idea became Supertrain. But here is the truth they never saw coming. Audiences did not want a moving palace. They wanted characters they could believe in. Instead, they got spectacle without soul. NBC poured millions into production. The budget exploded. Sets were enormous. Marketing was relentless. And expectations climbed to dangerous heights. When the show finally aired, the reaction was cold. Not curious, not impressed. Just cold. Critics attacked the weak writing. Viewers struggled to connect with the rotating cast. Episodes felt hollow despite the visual ambition. The ratings dropped fast. Panic set in. The network tried to fix it. They cut the budget. They rewrote the tone. They even removed the futuristic angle, but nothing worked. The damage was already done. The audience had moved on. Within months, the show collapsed. What was meant to be television history became a warning, a reminder that scale does not replace storytelling. And that is where the countdown truly begins. But because this was not the only disaster hiding in the 70s. Not even close. Number 19. Hello, Larry, 1979. On paper, it looked safe. A recognizable lead, a familiar sitcom structure, a network ready to turn star power into ratings. That was the bet behind Hello, Larry. But television has a brutal way of exposing weak ideas. And this one unraveled fast. The show centered on a radio talk show host trying to raise his daughters while balancing work and family life. It had all the ingredients of a standard domestic sitcom, but that was part of the problem. Nothing about it felt fresh. The humor was thin. The emotional beats felt forced, and the character dynamics never developed the spark needed to keep viewers invested. What made the failure more painful was the expectation surrounding it. That with a known star in the lead, the network clearly hoped audiences would connect quickly. Instead, critics attacked the writing, and viewers saw little reason to stay loyal. The series quickly developed a reputation for being bland, awkward, and forgettable. That is what makes Hello, Larry such a perfect flop for this list. It was not a wild experiment that collapsed under ambition. It was something even more dangerous, a supposedly safe idea that still failed. And when a show cannot survive with every advantage already handed to it, the fall feels even more embarrassing. Number 18. The Last Resort, 1979. Set in a tropical resort, The Last Resort aimed to capture the charm of vacation life, mixing adventure and comedy. The show followed a quirky group of employees running the resort, with zany mishaps and romantic entanglements. It had all the ingredients of a classic ensemble comedy, but the execution faltered. The humor was inconsistent, with some moments falling flat while others leaned into slapstick that didn't resonate. The characters, though colorful, felt more like stereotypes than relatable personalities, leaving audiences disconnected. The resort setting, which should have been vibrant and engaging, instead felt dull and repetitive, offering little variation episode after episode. The premise lacked enough depth to sustain interest beyond the initial novelty. As the show struggled to find its rhythm, ratings quickly plummeted. NBC pulled the plug after a short run. The Last Resort serves as a cautionary tale. While location-based shows can be visually appealing, they require strong or consistent character development and more than just a beautiful backdrop to keep viewers coming back. Number 17. The Quest, 1976. The Quest was NBC's ambitious attempt at an action-packed adventure series, but it never lived up to its promise. The show followed two brothers searching for their missing father in the Wild West, combining elements of both westerns and adventure stories. On paper, it sounded like a gripping tale of intrigue and excitement, but it faltered on screen. The pacing was uneven, with action scenes feeling forced and drawn out, and the character development was almost non-existent. Instead of building suspense, the show relied heavily on formulaic storylines that quickly became predictable. Audiences couldn't connect with the characters, and the writing lacked depth. Despite the strong cast and a promising concept, The quest failed to deliver the kind of thrilling, character-driven adventure it needed to keep viewers engaged. NBC canceled it after a single season, leaving behind a show that tried to capture the spirit of the time but ultimately couldn't rise above the noise. The quest serves as a reminder that even the most promising concepts can quickly fade away if they fail to deliver on their potential. Number 16. The Worst Week, 1977. The Worst Week followed a hapless protagonist whose life was a continuous series of disasters, particularly during the week leading up to his wedding. With the promise of a classic sitcom setup, awkward situations, misunderstandings, and comedic tension, the show had all the right elements. However, the relentless cycle of bad luck became tedious rather than funny. The humor was repetitive, relying too heavily on predictable slapstick, with no meaningful character development or fresh takes. Audiences began to feel that the characters' misfortunes were no longer charming, but simply annoying. The concept, while potentially appealing, lacked emotional depth and overstayed its welcome quickly. The pacing was sluggish, with jokes that felt dragged out rather than quick and punchy. Critics were unkind, and the show struggled to maintain a foothold. Ratings faltered, and The Worst Week was canceled after just one season. It serves as a reminder that even a strong comedic premise can only go so far if the execution doesn't keep the audience invested in the characters and storylines. Number 15. The Brady Bunch Hour, 1976. Nostalgia can be powerful, but it can also be dangerous when misunderstood. The Brady Bunch Hour took a beloved sitcom and transformed it into something almost unrecognizable. Music, skits, comedy segments, a complete reinvention of what audiences once loved. The intention was clear: keep the cast together, evolve with the times, turn a family sitcom into a variety spectacle. But audiences did not want evolution. They wanted familiarity. The result felt forced. Performances lacked authenticity. Even the cast seemed uncomfortable with the format. Critics noticed immediately. Viewers felt it even faster. Instead of reviving the brand, the show damaged it. Ratings dropped. Interest faded. What should have been a celebration became an awkward misstep. The cancellation came quickly, and with it came a lesson that still echoes today. You cannot reshape something iconic without understanding why it mattered in the first place, because once that connection breaks, the audience does not follow. Number 14. Tabitha, 1977. Some shows inherit magic, but inheriting magic does not mean you understand how to use it. Tabitha tried to extend the legacy of a beloved supernatural sitcom. The idea felt logical. Focus on the next generation. Let the charm continue. Let the audience stay in a world they already adored. But something subtle had changed. The tone no longer felt effortless. The humor felt manufactured. The spark that made the original series feel alive was missing, and audiences sensed it immediately. The show centered on Tabitha as a young adult navigating life with magical abilities. On paper, it offered potential, but execution lacked depth. Stories felt repetitive. Characters lacked chemistry. Even the magic itself felt smaller. Viewers compared it to what came before. That comparison was unforgiving. Ratings slipped. Interest faded. The illusion broke. The show did not survive long. It became another example of how difficult it is to recreate something iconic, because what makes a show special is not just its premise, it is the feeling it creates. And when that feeling disappears, even magic cannot save it. Number 13. The Ropers, 1979. Success can be misleading. When a parent show dominates television, it creates a dangerous assumption that any extension of it will succeed. The Ropers was built on that assumption. A popular couple from a hit sitcom given their own stage, their own story, or their own spotlight. But something shifted the moment they stood alone. The supporting energy that made them work was gone. Without the original ensemble, their dynamic felt thinner, less engaging, less vibrant. The humor struggled to evolve. Episodes relied on familiar patterns without the same impact. Audiences who once loved the characters began to lose interest. Ratings told the story clearly. There was also a deeper issue: timing. The network moved quickly, perhaps too quickly. The show did not have time to grow into itself. It was expected to succeed immediately, and when it did not, the response was swift. Cancellation followed, quiet but decisive. It revealed a harsh truth about television. Popularity is not transferable. What works in one environment does not always survive in another. Number 12. Were Pink Lady and Jeff, 1978. Pink Lady and Jeff was a bold attempt at merging American and Japanese pop culture, but it ended up being a monumental disaster. The show was created to capitalize on the popularity of the Japanese musical duo Pink Lady, who were famous for their energetic songs and unique performances. The American network, NBC, paired them with comedian Jeff Altman to create a variety show that mixed music, sketches, and comedy. The idea seemed like it could work. After all, Pink Lady had a large fan base. However, the execution was a mess. The cultural disconnect between the Japanese duo and the American audience was glaring, with language barriers and awkward jokes falling flat. The lack of chemistry between Pink Lady and Jeff made the sketches uncomfortable, and the musical numbers seemed out of place rather than exciting. Critics were scathing, and audiences quickly tuned out. Within weeks, the show was canceled. Pink Lady and Jeff serves as a reminder that sometimes even the most unique ideas can flop when the execution fails to connect with the intended audience. Number 11. Struck by Lightning, 1979. There is something deceptively simple about teen comedy. It looks easy. Familiar settings, young energy, relatable struggles. Networks often believe this formula will always work, but the truth is far less forgiving. Struck by Lightning entered television with that exact confidence. It centered on high school life, authority figures, rebellion, humor built around youth culture. On paper, it had all the right ingredients, but something critical never came together. But the writing lacked sharpness. The humor felt dated even as it aired. Characters spoke, but rarely connected. Instead of capturing real teenage emotion, the show drifted into shallow storytelling. Audiences reacted quickly. Younger viewers did not see themselves in it. Older viewers did not find enough substance to stay invested. That left the show in a dangerous middle ground where no audience truly claimed it. CBS attempted to hold its position, but ratings slipped steadily. Each episode confirmed the same pattern. Viewers were not returning. There was no growing buzz, no late surge of interest, just quiet decline. The cancellation came without surprise. What makes this failure significant is how ordinary it felt. There was no dramatic collapse, no massive controversy, just a show that failed to matter. And in television, the worst fate is not being hated, it is being ignored, because once a show becomes invisible, it is already over. Number 10, When Things Were Rotten, 1975. Expectation can be a heavy weight, especially when it comes from greatness. When Things Were Rotten carried the creative signature of Mel Brooks, a name associated with bold humor and sharp satire. That alone created anticipation. The premise leaned into parody, a comedic take on Robin Hood-style legends, absurd humor, exaggerated characters, a world designed for laughter. But television is a different battlefield than film. Timing is tighter. Audiences are less patient. The humor did not translate as expected. What worked brilliantly in films felt stretched in episodic format. Jokes lost impact. Scenes lingered too long, and the rhythm never settled into something consistent. Critics recognized flashes of brilliance, moments where the humor hit perfectly, but those moments were not enough to sustain an entire series. Viewers wanted consistency. They wanted momentum. Instead, they received uneven storytelling. Ratings struggled from early episodes. The audience did not fully connect. And once that connection weakens, it rarely recovers. The show was canceled after a short run. Its failure is not about lack of talent. It is about mismatch, the wrong format, the wrong pacing, the wrong moment. Because even the greatest creators can stumble when the medium changes. And the next entry proves that even stranger ideas could fall even harder. Number 9. Holmes and Yo-Yo, 1976. Sometimes an idea sounds intriguing simply because it is unusual. Through a detective story mixed with science fiction, a human cop paired with a robot partner. It feels different. It feels bold. Holmes and Yo-Yo leaned fully into that concept. The robot was flawed, malfunctioning, unpredictable. The humor came from chaos, from things going wrong at the worst possible moment. But novelty fades quickly when structure is weak. The show relied heavily on the gimmick. Episode after episode followed the same pattern. Malfunction, confusion, resolution. Without variation, the formula became predictable. The comedic tone also struggled. It could not decide how seriously to take itself. At times it felt like parody. At others it aimed for genuine detective drama. That inconsistency created distance between the show and its audience. Critics were harsh. Many labeled it one of the weakest sitcoms of its time. The viewers did not defend it. Ratings declined steadily. The show did not last long. It vanished before it had a chance to evolve. Its failure highlights a key truth. A strong concept can attract attention, but only strong execution can keep it. Because once the novelty wears off, the foundation is all that remains. And if that foundation is weak, the collapse is inevitable. Number 8. The Fantastic Journey, 1977. There was a growing ambition in the 70s. Television wanted to feel bigger, stranger, more cinematic. Networks started chasing ideas that felt ahead of their time. But ambition without control often leads to collapse. The Fantastic Journey was one of those ambitious experiments. A group of strangers trapped in a mysterious dimension. Time did not behave normally. Reality shifted without warning. But each episode introduced new dangers, new worlds, new rules. The concept had potential. It hinted at something deeper, something immersive, but execution never matched that promise. The storytelling lacked cohesion. Episodes felt disconnected. Characters drifted without clear arcs. Viewers struggled to understand the larger narrative. There was also a pacing issue. The show moved too fast in some moments and too slowly in others. Instead of building tension, it created confusion, and confusion is fatal for serialized storytelling. Audiences began to drop off. Ratings weakened. The network lost confidence. The show was canceled before it could fully explore its ideas. What makes this failure fascinating is how modern it feels. A concept that might succeed today struggled in its own time. It arrived too early. Because sometimes television is not just about quality, it is about timing. Number 7. The Fitzpatricks, 1977. Not every failure is loud. Some shows fade quietly. No controversy, no major backlash, just a slow disappearance from public memory. The Fitzpatricks followed a working-class family trying to navigate everyday struggles. It aimed for realism, emotional depth, honest storytelling. But realism alone is not enough. The show lacked a strong hook. Nothing pulled viewers in week after week. Characters were believable but not compelling enough to sustain long-term interest. There was also an issue with tone. The drama felt subdued, almost too restrained. Without moments of intensity or surprise, the narrative struggled to create momentum. CBS gave it a chance, but ratings never rose. The audience remained small. Engagement stayed low. Eventually, the network made its decision. The show ended after one season. Its failure highlights a different kind of problem. Not every show fails because it is bad. Some fail because they are not memorable. And in television, memorability is everything, because if viewers cannot recall your story, they will not return to it. Number 6. Me and the Chimp, 1972. Me and the Chimp was a wild idea that seemed to have all the makings of a hit. A family comedy about a man who adopts a mischievous chimpanzee as part of his family. On paper, it was quirky and full of potential, but the show quickly became a laughingstock. While animal comedies had been successful in the past, Me and the Chimp failed to capture the charm or humor necessary to make it endearing. The humor was repetitive, more relying on predictable slapstick and sight gags that quickly wore thin. The relationship between the human characters and the chimp lacked any genuine emotional connection, making the whole premise feel forced. Viewers couldn't relate to the absurdity of a chimp being treated as a family member, and the lack of heart made the show feel shallow. The show struggled with both poor writing and weak character development, and after just one season, Me and the Chimp was canceled. It remains a perfect example of how even the most outlandish premises need strong execution and heart to work. Number 5. The Texas Wheelers, 1974. Some shows arrive with strong ingredients, a capable cast, a grounded premise, a tone that feels closer to reality than fantasy. On paper, that should be enough, but television rarely rewards what looks good on paper. The Texas Wheelers focused on a struggling family trying to rebuild their lives. There was emotional weight in the premise, a sense of sincerity that separated it from louder comedies of the time. But sincerity alone could not carry it. The show struggled to balance humor with drama. Moments that should have felt heartfelt instead felt uneven. The tone shifted unpredictably. Viewers were unsure whether to laugh or reflect. There was also a pacing issue. Episodes moved slowly. Scenes lingered without purpose. Instead of building emotional investment, they created distance. Audiences began to drift away, not because they rejected it, but because it failed to hold their attention. CBS tried to position it as something different, something more grounded than typical sitcoms. But difference is not always an advantage. Sometimes it becomes a barrier. Ratings declined steadily. The show could not find its audience. Cancellation followed quietly. Its failure reveals something important about the era. Television was beginning to experiment with realism, but had not yet mastered it. Because when tone is uncertain, the audience becomes uncertain too, and uncertainty rarely leads to loyalty. Number 4. Cliffhangers, 1979. Television in the 70s followed a rule: start a story, finish it in the same hour, let the audience leave satisfied. That rule kept things simple, predictable, comfortable. Then came cliffhangers, and it broke that rule completely. Each episode delivered 3 separate stories: adventure, mystery, suspense, but none of them ended. Every segment stopped at the most intense moment. Every answer delayed, every resolution pushed to the next week. At first this felt exciting, something new, something bold, but excitement quickly turned into frustration. Viewers missed episodes, and suddenly nothing made sense. Characters appeared without context. Stories continued without explanation. This was not a show you could casually watch. It demanded attention and memory. And in that era, television was not built for that level of commitment. NBC believed audiences would adapt. They did not. Ratings dropped quickly. Confusion replaced curiosity. There were attempts to adjust pacing, but the structure itself remained the problem. The format was simply too advanced for its time. The show ended before its stories could conclude, leaving behind unfinished arcs and unanswered questions. But what makes this failure fascinating is how familiar it feels today. Serialized storytelling now dominates television, but in 1979 it felt alien. Sometimes a show is not wrong. It is just early, and being early can look exactly like failure. Number 3. Turnabout, 1979. The idea was impossible to ignore. A married couple wakes up and discovers their bodies have been swapped, their identities reversed, their entire reality turned inside out. Turnabout built everything around that premise. It promised humor from confusion, insight from perspective, a chance to explore relationships in a completely new way. The first episode delivered curiosity. Viewers tuned in to see how far the idea could go. But that curiosity had a limit. The problem appeared quickly. Every episode followed the same pattern: shock, adjustment, misunderstanding, resolution. Without variation, the concept began to repeat itself. The surprise disappeared. The structure became predictable. There was also a deeper issue with tone. Some scenes leaned toward thoughtful exploration of identity. Others pushed exaggerated comedy. That inconsistency made it difficult for audiences to fully engage. The performances tried to carry the concept, but the writing held them back. Dialogue felt forced. Situations stretched beyond believability. Ratings declined with each passing week. The initial intrigue could not sustain long-term interest. NBC recognized the pattern early. The cancellation came swiftly. What remains is a lesson about high-concept storytelling. A strong idea can open the door, but without evolution, it cannot keep that door open. Because once the audience understands the trick, they stop being impressed by it. Number 2. The Chevy Chase Show, 1993. The world expected a late-night comedy classic when The Chevy Chase Show was announced. After all, Chevy Chase was a beloved comedic icon from Saturday Night Live and films like Caddyshack and National Lampoon's Vacation. Yet, despite high expectations, the show fell flat in spectacular fashion. The format was simple: a late-night talk show with guests, comedy sketches, and Chase's sharp humor. Unfortunately, the show lacked the quick wit and energy that viewers associated with the late-night genre. The pacing was awkward. The chemistry between Chase and his guests felt forced, and the jokes came across as flat and outdated. More than just poor execution, the show suffered from an identity crisis. Chase's signature comedy didn't mesh well with the talk show format, making him appear stiff and uncomfortable. Viewers were quick to tune out, and the show was canceled after just 5 weeks. The failure of the Chevy Chase Show is a reminder that star power alone can't carry a show. The execution, tone, and format must come together to create a cohesive viewing experience. Number 1. Richie Brockelman Private Eye, 1978. Not every failure announces itself with noise. Some arrive quietly, fade quietly, and disappear before anyone fully notices. Richie Brockelman Private Eye followed a young detective who relied on intelligence rather than aggression. He observed, he listened, he solved cases through patience instead of force. The approach felt different from typical detective shows of the era. There were no exaggerated action sequences, no heavy dramatics. The tone leaned toward realism, subtlety, a slower unfolding of mystery. Critics recognized that difference. Some even appreciated the grounded style, but appreciation does not always lead to audience loyalty. The pacing became the central issue. Episodes moved carefully, too carefully. Without strong peaks of tension, viewers struggled to stay engaged. The stakes felt muted. The urgency diminished. There was also a lack of strong identity. The show did not fully embrace procedural excitement, nor did it commit to deep character study. It remained somewhere in between. That middle ground proved difficult to sustain. Viewers drifted away gradually, not because the show failed dramatically, but because it failed to hold attention. Ratings never stabilized. NBC allowed it a brief run, but the outcome became inevitable. Its disappearance feels almost invisible, and that is what makes it the most revealing entry on this list, because sometimes a show does not fail by doing something wrong. It fails by not doing enough to be remembered. Some shows fail loudly, others disappear without a sound, but every one of these tells a story about risk and timing and audience connection. Which one surprised you the most? And which forgotten flop should have survived? Let me know. And stay tuned for more stories television tried to erase.